a weekly program about important issues and events in the two Virginias.
Good morning. Welcome to this edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Melinda Zosh. This morning, we're going to be discussing the regular legislative session in West Virginia. It's underway right now. It's a 60-day session. We will also discuss which legislation may impact businesses and business owners right here in the Mountain State. So joining me now via Zoom, we have two guests this morning. John O'Neill, the Executive Director of the Development Authority of Mercer County. And John is a familiar face here on WVVA. He's here every Wednesday at 5 for our Small Business Wednesday segment. Also joining us is Republican State Senator Chandler Swope. He's represented District 6 here in West Virginia since 2016. That covers all of Mercer County and parts of McDowell, Mingo, and Wayne counties. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So it's great to be with you.
Mr. Swope, I'll talk with you first. What legislation is being discussed that may be of interest to small business owners?
Well, our tied for number one issues, and I say tied for number one because neither is more important than the other, are elimination of personal income tax and broadband. Both are critically important to West Virginia and also critically important to small business, actually all business, not just small business. But in my opinion, the elimination of personal income tax in West Virginia will make us the 10th state in the U.S. who does not have any personal income tax. That's a real game changer there because the 9 states who do have it are growing at faster rates than, 9 out of 10 of the fastest growing states in the country are income tax-free states. It will take a few years for that impact to show up, but I really believe that this is the time that we can work our way through that in a relatively short period, perhaps as little as 3 years. So to me, that's the most exciting thing that we're working on. The broadband issue is going to get a lot of federal money, but it takes a lot of time for it to take an impact. The FCC money that's being awarded to West Virginia is substantial, but it'll take 5 to 10 years to fill in the voids in broadband coverage in West Virginia. But the two together are absolutely critical.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the elimination of the income tax. I know Governor Justice mentioned that quite a bit in his State of the State address. And John, can you touch on that a little bit on why that would be so important for businesses and business owners here in West Virginia?
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. And thank you, Melinda. Thanks for asking me to be part of this program today. I think it's a pretty good combination here. You know, from our perspective, our office deals with many potential prospects, business owners that are thinking about locating to our state, or even business owners that are thinking about expanding, and they're inevitably one of the first 2 or 3 questions that they ask has to do with taxation. It has to do with what's the business tax rate, what's the corporate net income tax rate, and even about personal income taxes. So the fact that our legislature is at this time considering reducing and then eliminating the personal income tax really will put us in a very strong competitive position.
Yeah, and as Mr. Swope mentioned, if that happens here in West Virginia, we would become the 10th state to have no income tax. What do each of you know as far as studies about how no income tax has impacted other states? I believe Tennessee might be one of them that does not have the income tax, but Mr. Swope, could you touch on that as far as the successful elimination of that income tax in other states and what you know about that?
Well, interestingly, the 9 states who are income tax free at this time, no state has eliminated income tax in the last 40 years. So the income tax free 9 states versus the other 41 states are status quo. They've been that way for 40 years. If we become the 10th state, that will give us a head start on other states who may be considering the same change in their tax structure. As if all states were income tax free, we wouldn't have an advantage. But if we become only one of 10 of the 10th state, then that will give us a very strong competitive advantage to other states who are not income tax free. People are moving out of New England in large numbers, going mostly to Florida and Tennessee, which are income tax free states. And that seems to be the one thing that moves the needle. You can have a higher or lower sales tax, you can have different property tax rates, but it's income tax that people really focus in on. And people coming from New England can get to West Virginia a lot faster than they can get to Florida or Tennessee. So I'm very excited that this is the year that we may be able to do that. I've been characterizing this issue as the biggest economic development opportunity that could happen in West Virginia in 50 years. So it's a major thing. 4 years ago, the Senate tried to eliminate income tax with a model that was only going to reduce the highest rate of personal income tax from 6.5% to 6.3%, just a very tiny change. And we were going to increase our sales tax a very tiny amount. And it meant all kinds of resistance. Oh, you can't do that. You'll bankrupt people. But now the political stars have come into alignment, and not only the Senate, but the House and the governor are all focused on this one issue. And I've always said a wagon will roll a lot better if all the horses are hitched to the same end. And now in this particular session, all the horses are hitched to the same end. Now, what the final model will look like remains to be seen. But if we can pull it off, I will have earned my salary as a state senator, I believe.
Yeah, I believe so. And I'm glad you mentioned that everyone is on the same page this time around. So what would it take to eliminate the income tax? I guess walk our viewers through what the steps are to make that come to fruition here.
Well, the steps are you have to have legislation that are not necessarily legislation, but you have to set your budget to allow for the reduction of the tax and figure out ways to replace most of the tax with other sources of income. One thing that makes, so it's a budget issue. It's not a matter you have to have a new legislation to authorize it. It's just a matter of changing your policies and your budgeting process. And naturally, if you take away money from one source, you have to have money in another source to replace it. So it's sort of a negotiated thing, and both houses have to agree on the same, and the governor have to agree on the same model. 3 months ago or so, when we first started conversation on this, the House of Representatives was interested in doing it over a 12-year period. The Senate was primarily wanted to do it in 3 years. The governor now wants to do it in 2 years. So we'll talk about those. We'll negotiate between the three branches of government, and we'll try to come up with a formula that everybody is satisfied with. That's going to take a lot of work, but we're all enthusiastic about doing whatever it takes to make it work, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. So the process is just part of your normal budgeting and legislative process. It doesn't take a constitutional change or anything like that.
All right, well, thank you for explaining that. Gentlemen, we do have to take a quick break, but we have much more to talk about. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to this edition of In Focus. This morning, we've been talking about the state income tax, or eliminating the income tax here in West Virginia. We're also talking with State Senator Chandler Swope and also John O'Neill, who's a familiar face here on WVVA. But we're talking about legislation and things that are being discussed that could potentially help small business owners. So, gentlemen, again, thank you for joining us. And Mr. Swope, you did mention also broadband. So what specifically is being brought up in this legislative session about broadband that would be of interest to our viewers?
Well, the main opportunity we have is the FCC has just bid out through a reverse auction process several $100 million worth of broadband expansion throughout the state. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but they divided the entire state into census blocks, meaning a certain number of citizens live in a certain area. They do studies to see what kind of broadband service is available in those census blocks. And then there are half a dozen vendors who bid on providing that service over a period of time with the federal government funding it. It's got some flaws in the system because they define a census block as underserved if no one in that census block has full agreed upon service at 25 gigs down and 3 gigs up is the standard. 25.3 is how they refer to it. If even one citizen in a citizen block has that, they move it aside for the next round of bidding. I don't think that was a very good process, but that's what the FCC set their guidelines up on. But I had a report on it just a couple days ago that showed the maps of the areas that are underserved, not served at all, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a huge job. 4 years ago, when I first got in the legislature, 50% of West Virginians had no access to broadband. That's increased some over the past 4 years, but we still have a long way to go. This federal program, even though it's going to take a number of years, not months or weeks, to implement, it's going to move us forward at the same rate other states are being moved forward. So thanks to the federal government, we at least have the opportunity. And these are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects, not just a few million here and there. So I'm optimistic that we finally have gotten to go where we can go forward with improving broadband coverage. But it's still, I want to be clear, it's still going to take a good deal of time before we see the full effect of it.
Right, and I'd like to bring John back in to ask this next question. John, I can imagine that broadband access would really help bring people here into the state of West Virginia. Can you just touch on that, how better broadband would help maybe bring in potential business owners here?
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. As Senator Swope said, there's a big effort at the federal level to provide resources, but it's taking just a commitment from our state leadership to pursue those funds and to locate them, to tap into them, and to bring them to our state. And it's not I'll say it this way: West Virginia has been historically underserved in terms of our broadband capacity and the reach. And it's a question that every single time that we're trying to recruit a company to Mercer County, it's in the top 3 or 4 questions they ask is, tell us about broadband availability, capacity, any main lines that are running through, what's available not just in Mercer County, but in the surrounding counties. So it's a vital thing. It's crucial to not just to recruiting companies to our region, to our county, to our state, but even in helping existing businesses to maintain and grow their workforce. We've got companies that we deal with here in the county on a regular basis that are just crying out for reliable broadband, more capacity. It's as much a workforce retention effort as it is a recruitment effort.
Yeah, I can imagine that better broadband would certainly help bring in more folks here and help sell them on coming into Mercer County and surrounding areas. Mr. Swope, what else is being discussed right now in the legislative session that may be of interest to our viewers, maybe business owners or others in our community?
I'll have to think a minute about, we've got about 2,000 bills have been submitted already, and quite a few of those have to do with economic development. One of the things on our list is to try to get rid of the business inventory tax. That's a difficult one because it takes a constitutional change to allow a change in property tax rates. But the business and inventory tax taxes the inventory that businesses have manufactured on the 1st of July each year. If a company has $20 million worth of inventory on their yard, so to speak, that hasn't been sold, they have to pay property tax on it. And other states don't do that, so it's a job killer for West Virginia. That tax has been in place for a long time, and we've been working on it for a couple of years to try to eliminate it. It's on our agenda again this year, but we have to put it on the next election to get the voters to allow us to make a constitutional change to cut their taxes. That sounds kind of ironic, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, and John, how do you think that might help if that tax is cut? How would that help local business owners?
Yeah, there's no question that the inventory, machinery, equipment tax, personal property tax, it is a disadvantage. I mean, currently, manufacturers, warehouse distributors, anybody that has products that they're making and looking to sell elsewhere, you know, they're taxed on their equipment, they're taxed on their inventory, and it is something that's not the case in our surrounding states and many of the other businesses throughout the state. So without a doubt, that would make us more competitive. And as Senator Swope said, that's more of a long-term proposition. That's not something the legislature can just pass this year. It would require a constitutional amendment and to be voted on by the voters at the next election. But it is something that would be very beneficial to our state.
Yeah, definitely. And John, as you mentioned, that's a long-term proposition. But Mr. Swope, is there anything in the short-term future that you see out of all those 2,000 bills that is likely to be passed and to go into effect this year?
There's a lot of small things. It's hard to point out individual bills, but we're working on a lot of education bills. We've been working on education for a long time. The last couple of years, we've been able to do some significant raises for teachers and other public employees. That's helped. But there are a lot of tweaking we need to do to our education system. I think education is absolutely critical to economic development, because if people can't find qualified workers when they get here, they won't come. There's not one single thing in the education agenda that I could point to, but there are about 25 or 30 bills that address education at various levels. One of the bills will allow teachers to move forward to achieve master's degrees while they're still teaching. It seems like a small issue, but now most teachers who go for master's degrees have a goal of getting into administration. So the rules that affect that have been rewritten a little bit to encourage teachers to go on for master's degrees and increase their income. Their salary will go up, but they want the master's degrees to be in the education field that the teacher's teaching in. So to improve the quality of the teachers who are already there, but can increase their training, improve their training, and also improve their salaries at the same time. So that's just an illustration of the kind of things that we're looking at in education.
That's wonderful. Gentlemen, we do have to take a quick break. We have much more to talk about. We'll be right back after this. Good morning once again, everyone, and welcome back to this edition of In Focus. This morning, we're talking to John O'Neill with the Development Authority of Mercer County and also State Senator Chandler Swope. So, John, I'll start with you for this last segment. I know when you come in on Wednesdays, we talk about some good news for business owners, and that is always great to hear some things that, some advantages for business owners in our area. What has your research shown you lately as far as good news for business owners out there? Because it's been such a hard year with COVID. So what good news can we share with the business owners?
Well, again, I would say that it's very good news what we're hearing coming out of the state legislature right now. I mean, we've every single thing that Senator Swope has talked about are issues that we have to deal with on the ground in terms of recruiting business and in terms of trying to retain and help businesses survive and thrive. He talked about the personal income tax reduction. That's huge. He talked about broadband expansion, very, very important. And recently there, just a moment ago, we talked about the education issue. That's always at the top of the list. When we're talking to companies coming in, especially those of any size, they want to make sure that we've got quality public schools. They want to make sure that we've got charter school options, private school options, homeschool options. They want a diverse and robust educational system to meet the needs of a diverse workforce. And at this moment, our legislature is building on some of the successes of the last couple of years. And honestly, we're making steps at a pace far beyond what any of our surrounding states are doing. They're making us more competitive, making our state more attractive. So I would say it's very encouraging for existing businesses. and it certainly should be encouraging to everyone in our area in terms of the future for trying to draw in not only business, but additional population as well.
And Mr. Swope, is there anything that hasn't been discussed in the state Senate or in the legislature, in your opinion, that needs to be to help small businesses and folks in our area?
In the context of, is the current agenda good or is it missing things? It's not missing much. It's very diverse, very solid agenda. We're focused on the right kinds of things. Some of the smaller changes, or might appear to be smaller, that have happened, I'm very enthusiastic about. One is that the Economic Development Authority in the state was a branch of the Commerce Department. The Economic Development Authority worked under the Commerce Department. The governor has asked, and I think that's been resolved, to raise it to a cabinet level position. The Economic Development Office will now become one of the cabinet level offices reporting directly to the governor. Also, the tourism department is raised to a cabinet level. So the governor is by making those moves, it's not a budget move, it doesn't cost more money, it's the same people doing the same things, but by making those two areas report directly to the governor at the cabinet level allows the government to be right on top of tourism and economic development at the highest level possible. And I think that's a subtle change in politics, but a very effective change. Another thing that I found a little bit amusing is that the first 4 years I was there, we started our meetings on what they called Senate time. Senate time meant not before the hour. If you're supposed to drop the gavel at 11, it would be 11:15, 11:20, 11:30 because of stuff going on and so forth. And now the new Senate president's dropping the gavel at exactly 11, and you better be in your seat ready to go to work. All the committee chairs are doing the same thing. So we're getting more work done more efficiently just simply because we're not allowing things to just be delayed or dragged for various reasons because somebody didn't show up yet. And everybody in the Senate is responding very positively. When you drop the gavel on the hour, boy, everybody's in their seat. That seems subtle, but the more hours you get of productive work, the better job you can do of your legislation and the more bills you can process in the same period of time.
Hey, yeah, because 11 o'clock is 11 o'clock, right? Not 11:05 or 11:15 or 11:30. It's 11 o'clock.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you mentioned the tourism thing too. Now I know New River Gorge recently became a national park, which was big news for the Mountain State. It's its first national park here. What do you think that will mean as far as bringing tourism and extra revenue and dollars into West Virginia?
Well, that just simply improves our inventory of things to offer people, so that works very well. Another thing, I hope this isn't digressing too far, but something I've been working on for a couple of years that I'm re-entering now, introduced just today, is a program to let the DEP look after demolition of abandoned and dilapidated properties. That's a very serious problem in West Virginia with literally the budget estimates done by WVU a few years ago were near $500 million to clean up all this blight. And there has been in the past no program at a state level to cover that. Cities and counties are responsible for the cleaning up of their own neighborhoods. And unfortunately, the economic conditions that created the problem also mean the cities and counties don't have the money. So the program that I have submitted would allow the entire state to take on the job. And we have gotten federal programs from both HUD and ARC willing to put federal money into demolition, so forth. So that's something I'm working on personally. I think it's very important. You can't expect people to come here and enjoy the tourism with abandoned buildings and dilapidated properties all over. So little things like that are going on too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring you back in, John. We have about 2 minutes left on the clock here in our segment, but what would you like our small business owners out there in the community to know about maybe upcoming changes, or what do you hope they remember about this segment?
Yeah, well, I would just say this: it's encouraging to me to have the kind of people we've got in the right positions making decisions about legislation now. So Senator Swope is the chairman of the Economic Development Committee in the Senate. We've got a strong leadership in the Senate, strong leadership in the House, a strong governor, all on the same page, committed to trying to do things that are going to bring growth to our state. So we've seen tax reform, we've seen education reform, we've seen legal reform. Every effort's being made in every way with a sense of passion and intensity to try to make things easier on our existing business owners to maintain and grow, but also to make our state more attractive to other businesses trying to come in. So if there's any message I want to give to our small business community out there, it's, we did a good job putting people in the places where they are in our state legislature now, and, sit back and get ready. There's some good things that are in the pipeline.
All right, I want to thank our guests for joining us this morning, John O'Neill and State Senator Chandler Swope. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with our viewers out there, small business owners and otherwise. So again, thank you to our guests. Really appreciate them coming on. I also want to let our viewers know if you want to be featured here on In Focus, we air this segment every Sunday at 9 a.m. You can email me directly if you have an idea, if you'd like to be featured. That's mzosh, M-Z-O-S-H at WVVA.com. And our show's really about events and people in the two Virginias. So thank you all for joining us. That does it for this edition of In Focus. We'll see you all again next Sunday. Have a great day and stay safe.